Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I want to share probably the most important concept I've learned studying economics at one of the best institutions in the United Kingdom. And I wish I'd known this before I spent almost 100K on college. Not to say that that's the only valuable thing that I got out of it, but honestly, this idea is one of the most important things that I think I've learned in my 3 years in university, right? It's a very simple idea from statistics that explains why so many of us feel like we're falling behind or success is harder than it looks. And this idea is called selection bias. And I think it's incredibly useful for everyone to learn because it really teaches you how to view statements and facts in a different perspective and critically evaluate them. And that is a skill that is going to be especially important as we're going into this future full of AI generated content and whatnot, right? Critical thinking is going to be king. So, what is selection bias, right? I'm going to make this as approachable as possible. So, overall, in statistics, it's when the data you're looking at isn't representative of the whole because of the way it was chosen. You're only seeing a filtered sample, and that messes up your conclusion. So, let me give you an example, right? Think about a high school with 50 people in it, right? And we have five groups within them. We have group one, we have group two, three, four, and five. And let's also say that each of them have a differing ability in mathematics. So let's say group one, on average, gets about 20 out of 100. Like assuming like we have a 100 point math test. Group two gets 40, group three gets 60, four gets 80, and five, like on average, always tops the exam. Now, me being the head of education for the entire country, I want to figure out what the average mathematics test score is for all schools. So, let's also assume that I can only give 10 tests to a school at a time, right? Which means not everyone's going to get a test. And I'm going to rank schools' mathematical ability based on that test. Now, let's say I go to my five group school and I say that, okay, here are 10 tests, and I make only group 5 do it. Now, group 5 is the one that always gets 100 points in every math test. And after doing the test, yes, they get 100 points. Now, I look at that average and I'm like, wow, this school is amazing, right? You've given me 10 tests, all of them full marks. You're probably the best in the country. Now, this is actually not the actual reality for the school. If we made every one of those students, the 50 students, do a test, the average score will be about 60, right? And I, as the district examiner, have assumed that that sample that I chose of group 5 doing that test, who all got 100, is actually how good the school is. And this is the idea that I discussed earlier. It's that you're looking at a specific group of data points within the whole data set and drawing your conclusion based on characteristics of that data set. Now, why is this important? You might be asking, well, just make everyone do the test, right? This is not always feasible in real life. Let's think about a more abstract example, okay? And by abstract, I mean something that is not as easily quantifiable, okay? Let's think about all the successful tech founders who've dropped out of college and, made like $1 billion company, right? So I'm talking about people like Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, who all dropped out, formed like Facebook, formed Apple, and blew up in the next few years to a decade. Now, let's say that I am wanting to replicate their success, right? I am at my second year at Harvard or whatever, and I'm like, you know what? I want to be like Mark Zuckerberg. I want to be like Steve Jobs. So I'm going to drop out of college and start my own company. And obviously, I'll be as successful as them because, they also went to my college and they also dropped out and they became successful. Now, the problem with this kind of thinking is you're literally looking at a very specific sample size, like almost like a 0.1% of the entire sample, and comparing the results of that sample and applying it to you. Sure, there might be some characteristics that you have that would make you, that would make you more likely to experience that kind of success. But if you look at it, the problem statistically, it's just not really realistic. And let me explain this in a bit more detail. What we're essentially doing by saying is, I'm going to drop out and become a billionaire, is saying that these 3-4 people who have dropped out have been to the best college in the country. They have formed a $1 billion startup, right? Which means that if I do those things, I drop out and form a $1 billion company. Sorry, when I drop out, I'm also going to form a $1 billion company. Now the problem is that dropping out is not looking at the thousands or hundreds of thousands of people around the world who do the exact same thing and don't succeed, right? It's a concept called survivor's bias, which is essentially selection bias, but more geared towards explaining why people get inspired to, like, by all these successful figures and want to replicate what they've done, so they do the exact same things, even though statistically it's very unlikely that they'll be able to replicate it one for one. And this is also can be explained to other areas. Like, let's say you invest in crypto, right? Because you saw someone turn $500 to like 500K. You're looking at one very specific survivor, like one survivor who like got lucky or had some kind of, trait that you may or may not have. And you're thinking that if I do the same action, which is invest in crypto, I'll also get like, 1000x my money or whatever. But again, you're not realizing how many people entered that market and lost everything. The moral is that people don't account for unseen failures, right? And you underestimate the actual value of, or not value, you underestimate the actual population mean, because you're looking at that one sample size. So now let's extend this further, right? What is this telling me? Why is this something important? Why is this something that I'm telling you guys about? Because, to put it bluntly, it trains you to ask, what am I not seeing, right? You're always telling yourself, oh, I think, I don't have the entire picture. I need to get more information. This is not enough to make a detailed, calculated decision. And then that level of thinking really helps you think clearly about, money decisions, which are very important for most of us humans, relationships, success and failure, career choices, because it shows that it's not reasonable for you to drop out of university and expect yourself to be the next Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. When you understand selection bias, you also end up stopping to beat yourself up for not being like the rare exceptional success stories, right? Because you realize that not everyone who works hard ends up famous, rich, or super successful. And that's not because you're doing something wrong. It's just that they had specific traits that allowed them to become that way, right? Whether those traits were like pure luck, intelligence, network, it's very difficult to numerically point down as to why that happened, but it teaches you to always assume that there's an entire sample out there that you don't know and that you don't you can't possibly comprehend. So don't always take things for face value. There's a very famous quote in statistics that goes like, lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? Which is probably the second most important lesson that selection bias teaches you. Overall, the bottom line is it makes you see the world through a distorted lens. And if you can spot it, you can make smarter choices. And that's what I want to share with you guys. So hope you guys found this video useful. And if you have any questions, just put them in the description, the comment section below. And thanks for watching.